And I think that any dismantling of the commission, I think Barney Frank has said he doesn't see that happening. And I think that the notion that at least the enforcement part, where else would that go? Who would be doing that?
Well, one theory is a sort of homeland security that all gets thrown into the big pot, and you're one of it.
Yeah, I just, not being a policy guy, I just wonder if that's a smart thing to do, to start. Now, some suggestions like CFTC, SEC merging those. Mayor Shapiro, former chairman of the CFTC, former SEC commissioner, now chairman of the commission. That seems to make a lot of sense to me, changes like that. But I don't know that we've seen Homeland Security has been such a wonderful model for throwing together a lot of disparate entities into one giant organization. I don't know that would be smart.
Thank you.
Is that person picked by the company? Are they picked by the SEC? And do you ever run into instances, or are you concerned about that person maybe, being a part of the fraud themselves?
That's a little different than what I was outlining. What I was outlining is somebody, there's a newspaper story written, we've looked at your options, and it looks like some of your executives were just too lucky. They were exercising options every month exactly when the stock was at its lowest point. And how could they have known in advance? It looks like somebody was backdating options. And the company sees that. There's no investigation even open. The SEC reads the newspaper, the audit committee reads the newspaper. They say, you know what, we need to look into this right away. And so they hire a law firm that is only loyal to looking into finding out what happened here. They do a thorough investigation, collect the documents, interview the people, call up the staff and say, we're looking into this. We're going to self-report. We found some issues here. We'll let you know what we find. And they report to the audit committee, okay, it looks like the CEO, CFO were backdating options. They knew about it. They knew what they were doing. They understood the accounting. They knew that they were backdating things. They're guilty. We're throwing them out. And we're, yeah. Now, the one that's more controversial, I don't think that's that controversial. I don't think, the one that's more controversial, at the end of a case, the SEC concludes that there's problems at the company. And as part of the settlement, they want someone appointed who would become one of the undertakings, it's called, that the commission orders them to hire somebody not unacceptable to the staff to look into issues further, like to make sure that their internal controls are good, or like in a market timing case, to make sure that they have proper disclosures to mutual fund investors regarding market timing policies and that they have good controls in place to police that they're enforcing those policies. Or sometimes more with the Justice Department, one of the most famous instances, Bristol-Myers Squibb, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Newark appointed someone to be an overseer of Bristol-Myers Squibb. He didn't like something the CEO was doing, and I think they fired the CEO because the overseer wasn't happy. And that was a result of not really SEC, that's a result of a deferred prosecution agreement, which is we will not indict your company, we'll hold off, but in exchange we want this overseer poking around, looking at things, and if they're not happy with something, they're going to let us know. And so that got controversial with regard to who's being selected. There's some press about certain people, certain U.S. attorneys selecting certain former bosses and things like that. That's not really an SEC issue. But in terms of who those people are generally, they're all former judges, former prosecutors, not people who are with the company. They're not like appointing the CEO to do that. They're picking outsiders that have nothing to do with the company before. Like Richard Breeden, the former chairman of the SEC, played that role. It wasn't a big matter. So it's more of that. So they're pretty careful about who they select. There was a controversy about whether it's political cronyism picking certain people who they had relationships with, who some people may not have been too enamored with, like former Attorney Generals.
Let's take two more quick questions back to back. So if you have a really short one, we'll go to someone else. And then we can...
Sure. As to what kind of self-help measures they can take. What can I do with a statement that I get on my retirement account to make sure that that actually exists, that the transactions on those statements actually took place and that the shares actually reside somewhere?
A couple
let's get another question first in the hopper, and you can just keep that.
Yes.
Inquiries as well.
Yes,
Can you
same
explain
thing.
it a little
Yes. Something like the auction rate securities matters. Decisions will be made, who will do what, and trying to use resources responsibly. So a decision might be made, this group at the SEC will handle these investigations, FINRA will handle those investigations. And oftentimes there's a close working relationship with FINRA and the SEC to figure out who should be doing what. And what you don't want is duplicated effort. It's not fair. It doesn't make any sense as a public policy matter, and certainly defendants aren't going to like it, to be hearing from 50 different states, from the SEC, from FINRA, all about the exact same issue. It makes sense for people to figure out ways where the states get together and say, okay, Connecticut take the lead on this one, New York take the lead on that one, and figure out who should be doing what, coordinating it that way. SEC figured out what they should be doing and trying to work closely. When I ran the Boston office, I worked very closely with Secretary Galvin's office and had an excellent working relationship with the folks in that office. And I had probably 10 times the staff, 20 times the staff that he had in his office. And one of the issues on that is the state is much more able to get tips. A lot of local people, if you're living in Massachusetts and you got a problem, you're going to call Galvin's office. You're not going to think of calling the SEC. But they might not have the resources to follow up on what they perceive to be good tips. So it makes a lot of sense for them to work closely together. One problem for the SEC is Galvin's office can announce, we've opened an investigation into this issue and we're going to look into it and get to the bottom of it right away. And when the staff has finished, his staff has finished what they've done, they can walk in his office and say, okay, we've drafted a complaint. It's supported by the evidence. Galvin will say, fine, file it. Whereas the SEC, they do not talk about their investigations. They never disclose what they're working on. And plus, if the staff in Boston decides they feel that they have an issue they can file a complaint on, it goes through 8 levels of review through all the other divisions, gets put on the commission's calendar, and not a peep about it until the commission's authorized the filing of a complaint. And so it often seems that the states are much quicker, much more on top of it, getting things done, because they can talk to the press. The secretaries of state or the attorney generals can hold a press conference and say, we're looking into this. And the SEC has this view that they do not talk about investigations until the commission's active, which means they're ready to file a complaint or announce a settlement.
This guy's
Yeah. There's 2 issues there for me on that. One is if there were a plane crash and word came out that someone gave a tip to the FAA that there's a defective part before that plane crashed. And the chairman of the FAA issued a press release that said, I'm greatly disturbed. There's word that there's a tip about a problem part on that plane. And I've asked the Inspector General to look into it. And we'll hear back from him in 6 months or a year. How would the FAA staff feel about that? Right? Plus, how would the public flying around feel about that? I think that generally, when you have an issue, like a word that there's been a tip about a mistake, the best way to handle that is to very quickly come out and tell the story. And to send people up to Congress and say, we can't tell you anything. We're not going to tell you what happened. Can't even give you chronology. Can't even tell you who worked on it, who might have made a mistake, and suggest maybe there's some corruption, but we can't tell you anything about it. That undermines the public's confidence in how the enforcement division is doing its work. And I think the only way to respond to that is to quickly get out as soon as you can the story so that if there was a defective part, we all know what it was. If certain people made a mistake, what happened? What can we learn from it? Now quickly the FAA gets on the planes and comes to the spot and gets the black box and announces as quickly as they can, okay, we found out what it is. It's this part. Let's make sure the other planes that have it are fixed right away. Now, there might be a very detailed final report that comes out a year later, sure. But you don't want people flying around thinking, because they're not going to fly around, thinking, can we trust this airline? Can we trust this plane? Can we trust the FAA? You have to reestablish trust by getting the word out as quickly as you can. In terms of advising the public, this websites on FINRA, on the SEC, in terms of all the questions to ask before you make an investment, they're really well done. Extremely well done. And I'd urge anybody, before they make any investment, look at those websites for investor education on the SEC's website, investor education on FINRA's website, to get an idea of what's going on. But the simplest thing is if you don't understand it, usually that's somebody trying to trick you. If you can't understand it, and I get that myself, believe me, my broker calls me, I can't understand it. And it's like, okay, you tried once, I'm done. If you don't understand it, you just steer away from it. And oftentimes, like Ponzi schemes, it's often the initial communication is some promise that is too good to be true. In this instance, it wasn't. It was just steady, very steady, and someone extremely sophisticated about lulling people into a false sense of security. But more often, it's people promising things that just cannot be true. But I'd recommend those websites and those investor education sites.